All right, today we are diving into a really fascinating text from the 19th century, and it's built around this deeply counterintuitive idea. What if the key to dealing with life's hardships isn't to fight back harder, but to surrender? It's a concept the author calls the school of resignation. So let's unpack it.
Right out of the gate, the author hits us with this incredibly stark question. It really just stops you in your tracks, right? It sets up the central conflict of the whole piece. If your leader, your ultimate example, were a crown of thorns, why would you expect a life free of pain? It's a provocative idea that goes against almost every modern instinct we have to avoid suffering at all costs.
And this leads us right to the fundamental problem this text is wrestling with. It's this clash, this friction, between our totally natural human desire for comfort and ease and a kind of spiritual call to embrace suffering, not as an accident, but as a core part of the journey.
So the argument here is that we shouldn't think of suffering as some strange detour from a happy life. No, in this view, it's actually the main road. The whole point isn't to figure out how to escape the fire, but to be shaped by it, to be conformed to the example of a leader who walked right through it first. It completely reframes pain. It's no longer an obstacle, it's the path itself.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? How do you deal with this conflict between what you want and a path that involves pain? Well, the author gives us this really powerful metaphor. You have to enroll in what he calls the school of resignation. And this right here, this is it. This is the final exam, the graduation speech, and the entire curriculum of that school, all rolled into one simple phrase. This is the absolute heart of the entire philosophy, the ultimate lesson you're meant to learn when facing any kind of hardship.
Now, it is so important to get what resignation means in this context. This is not about passive defeatism or just, giving up because you can't win. In this worldview, it's a radical and active choice. It's an intentional surrender of your personal agenda, and it's born out of a deep, profound trust in a greater plan.
So, what does this actually look like in real life? The author lays it out pretty clearly. He says this school has a series of, let's call them ultimate tests, to see if you've really, truly learned the lesson of surrender. And they are not easy.
The first test is just brutal. I mean, imagine you're at the absolute peak of your game. You're doing your most important work, you feel needed, and then bam, you're sidelined by sickness, completely taken out of the action. The test here is to accept being passive and suffering just as willingly as you accept being active and successful. To be willing, as the author puts it, to lie in the trenches as to scale the walls.
All right, the next test is all about obedience when there's no reward in sight. It's the challenge of working in what the text calls unpropitious fields, which is a fancy way of saying you're being told to go plow a rock. You pour all your energy in. You do the work day in and day out, but you see absolutely zero results. Real resignation means you just keep plowing because that's the task you were given. And now for a major ego check. This test is all about being demoted. You're taken from a place of influence, of honor. Maybe you're in the spotlight, and you're put into a role that feels totally insignificant. The real question is, can you serve just as faithfully in the shadows as you did on the main stage? And this might be the hardest one of all, being willing to let go of your good name. The author talks about being slandered and shamed, and how deeply painful that is. So the ultimate act of surrender is accepting that your reputation might be completely destroyed in service of the mission, trusting that your actual character, the real you, remains intact. Okay, so after hearing about those incredibly difficult tests, you're probably asking the same thing I was. Why on earth would anyone choose a path like this? It sounds awful. Well, the text gives us 3 really powerful reasons why someone would embrace this kind of radical surrender. So the whole argument really breaks down into 3 big claims. First, that surrender is a matter of what is fundamentally right. Second, that it's a matter of pure wisdom. And finally, that it's an act of loving trust. Let's take a quick look at each one. The first reason is pretty straightforward. The author's logic is that the creator has a fundamental right to direct the thing that was created. He uses that classic analogy of a potter and the clay. It's simply right and proper, in this view, for our will to yield to the will of the one who made us. The second reason is much more practical. It's just a matter of wisdom. The argument goes like this. If we always got exactly what we wanted, we would probably ruin ourselves. We often want things that aren't good for us.
So, surrendering to a higher, wiser will is actually the smartest path to our own long-term well-being, even if it feels painful in the short term.
Now, what's really interesting is how the third reason is framed. It's not a logical argument at all. It's a deeply personal, emotional appeal. It frames surrender not as a duty you have to perform, but as a response, a reciprocal act of love that's based on the ultimate sacrifice that was already made on your behalf.
So, let's say you manage to get through these tests and you accept these reasons. What happens then? What's the reward? Well, the text claims the result isn't misery or weakness, but something totally and completely unexpected. And this slide just lays out the payoff perfectly. A will that's always fighting reality, always in conflict, that leads to sorrow, fear, cowardice. But a will that is resigned, that has surrendered, the text says, that leads to constant happiness, a kind of holy courage, a lightness, and a complete defiance of fear. It's a total transformation.
To show what this courage looks like, the sermon tells the story of the early Christian martyr, Polycarp. The emperor threatens to banish him, take away all his treasures, and even kill him. And Polycarp just calmly replies that none of that is even possible, because his home, his treasure, and his life are already secure in a place the emperor can't even touch. That is a defiance of fear that comes from total resignation. So this brings us to the final, crucial question. How does a person actually get to this state of mind? The author is very, very clear on this point. It is not something you can achieve by just gritting your teeth and trying harder. Yeah, according to this text, true resignation is not a self-help technique you can master. It's presented as a spiritual transformation, a gift almost, that comes from a divine influence. The idea is that it's less about you conquering your own will and more about you allowing your will to be conquered. And the ultimate example of this is John the Baptist. Think about it. His own followers were leaving him to go follow Jesus, his rival. And he didn't try to compete. He celebrated it. He actively wanted the other guy to succeed more than him. This, the author says, is the absolute pinnacle of surrendering the ego, genuinely wanting someone else to be lifted up, even if it's at your own expense. And all of this leaves us with a final, really challenging question for today. This 19th century text is all about the complete surrender of the self. But we live in a 21st century world that celebrates personal ambition, self-assertion, and having an unbreakable will. So the question is, what, if any, is the value of surrender in a world like ours?